requirement. I'm doing a little bit something different from the series videos. So this is going to be kind of breaks in between my 4-part series. I have 2 more series coming up. It's going to be the Alter series and the Coherent series, so stay tuned for those. So today we're going to be talking about how to choose a path, a spiritual path. We're going to be discussing Western, Eastern, and esoteric traditions explained. Okay, so I try to make this in depth as possible. I am, however, not covering every single path, but the majority of them are the main streams of the path themselves. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. So here was the question from the subscriber, Jimmy Shand. Could you list the possible paths, please? I'm new to this and want to learn more about all of this, but don't know where to begin. First of all, thank you for submitting this question. I love when my subscribers do this. It's really important for me, and it actually gives me kind of a breakaway from a series that I've been working on. So I just wanted to say thank you for asking this question. I believe this will help you and many others. I remember going through this stage. I will make this as in-depth and a process as possible, with some commentary at the very beginning and at the end of the video in more depth about how and what to consider while choosing a path. I appreciate your inquiry, consideration, and thirst to get things started. And now we will begin. This is going to be a long form video. There are way too many paths, and I in no means carried all of them through. So there's lots of different ones. So that's where your research is going to have to come in. But I'm going to give you a basic foundation of the different paths that are out there for you to choose from. So let's go ahead and dive in. How to use this map of spiritual paths. What follows is a structured overview of major spiritual and esoteric traditions arranged in approximately chronological order of historical emergence. They are grouped broadly into Western esoteric and initiatory systems, Eastern contemplative and liberation traditions, indigenous and ancestral continuities, modern and postmodern developments. This structure is intentional. Spiritual traditions did not appear randomly. They arose in response to cultural shifts, philosophical crises, political upheaval, psychological and existential need. Understanding when and why a path emerged helps you understand what problem it is attempting to solve. This is not an exhaustive list of every spiritual path that has ever existed. It is a structured map of major streams that have significantly shaped spiritual development across cultures. Each of these paths contain depth in that could require years of study, dedicated practice, mentorship, and ethical formation. If something in this presentation resonates with you, the next step is not immediate adoption. The next step is research. So when you're researching, look at these primary bullet points. Primary text, historical development, actual practitioners, ethical frameworks, and required discipline. Do not build your understanding from short-form social media summaries. If you are new to a structured spiritual practice, one of the greatest mistakes you can make is constant movement. Sampling is easy, transformation is slow, and path reveals itself through practice, not aesthetic preference. It's something that resonates deeply. Commit to exploring it seriously for at least 6 months before deciding whether it's truly aligned with you. 6 months is not a lifetime commitment. It is enough time to experience discipline, the friction, the boredom, and the depth, and also the structural demands. Without that period, you are only reacting to novelty. On changing direction. There may come a time when your path shifts. This is normal. However, change should arise from discernment, maturation, real incompatibility, and not from restlessness. Spiritual development requires stability of nervous system, attention, and identity. Constant switching fragments all three. You will encounter a vast amount of modern spiritual content that is detached from historical lineage, stripped of ethical rigor, focused only on manifestation or aesthetic ritual, psychologically ungrounded, or simplified into vague energy language. This is often referred to loosely as New Age spirituality. So if you're wanting to get into an esoteric path, the New Age stuff, it's not going to give you the depth that you're looking for when you're starting out on a path, and I want to save you a lot of time. Okay, so that's why I mentioned that. Some contemporary movements contain useful tools, but when spiritual philosophy becomes diluted into instant enlightenment, just raise your vibration, prosperity without purification, ritual without discipline, identity without integration, the depth is lost. A genuine path includes ethical formation, psychological responsibility, steady, structure, long-term integration. If a system promises transformation without discipline, it's not a path, it's consumption. The chronological map is meant to help you see the landscape clearly, understand historical development, recognize differences between devotional, contemplative, ritual, philosophical, and pragmatic systems. Begin discerning what structure might refine you. You're not looking for what is the most dramatic. You are looking for what will shape you. And now we begin. A chronological map of spiritual paths. How to read this map. A path is not merely a belief system. It is a technology, a transformation, a structured method for changing consciousness, ethics, identity, and relationship to reality. For each path below that you will see when it emerges, how it comes into being, what it is, what its core goal is, how it is practiced, and who it tends to suit the best. Era 1. Ancient and Indigenous Continuities. Indigenous ancestral traditions, which are land-based spirituality. Now, I'm going back way far. Okay, so I'm going from the beginning of recorded history and magical history, which there's theories that it goes back even further, but I wanted to start from the first foundation and move your way up so that you completely understand how all of these paths have evolved over time and over eras and over cultures. So it's very important to start from the beginning. When it emerges, prehistoric, continuous across millennia, varied by culture. How it becomes into being emerges from place, survival, ecology, ancestry, veneration, and communal continuity. Spirituality as a lived relationship with land and unseen forces. What it is. A family of traditions rooted in ancestral lineage, sacred geography, and ceremony, not a single global system. The core goal is the right relationship, balance between human, land, ancestors, spirits, and community. So someone drawn to this is going to be more on the shamanic path. Okay, nature-based paths. This is someone who is usually born into these things and they learned it from their ancestors. So how it is practiced. Ceremony, offerings, seasonal rites, song, drumming, storytelling as cosmology. healing rites, elder transmission, initiations in some cultures. Who it suits, those with real access through culture, lineage, or respectful mentorship. Those who can approach without extraction or spiritual tourism. Early temple and priesthood traditions, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, etc. When it emerges, the Bronze Age onward, 3000 BCE. How it comes into being. City-states and empires form. Temple complexes become spiritual, and political technology, priesthoods, codify ritual, astronomy, offerings, and purity laws. What it is. Cosmology maintained through ritual order, alignment of human life with divine cycles. The core goal is to maintain cosmic harmony, secure blessings, stabilize civilization, maintain right relationship with gods and forces. How it's practiced. Temple rites, offerings, purity, hymns, astronomical timing, sacred kinship, funerary rites, and this varies by culture. Who it suits. Best approached historically/devotionally, modern practice tends to be a reconstructionist path or symbolic. Era 2, Axial Age Liberation Paths, from 800 to 200 BCE. Those roots often earlier. 3. Vedic, Upanishadic paths, early Hindu philosophy. When it emerges, Vedas earlier, Upanishads 800 to 300 BCE. How it comes into being. Ritual religion deepens into internal inquiry. What is the self, and what is ultimate reality? What is it? A spectrum, ritual plus metaphysics plus liberation teachings. The core goal is moksha, which is liberation through knowledge, discipline, devotion, or service. How it's practiced. Study, contemplation, mantra, ritual in some, meditation, and ethical restraints. Who this suits. Those who want metaphysical depth and long-form discipline. Jainism. When it emerges, traditionally ancient, historically prominent by the 6th and 5th centuries BCE. How it comes into being. Radical ethical path emphasizes liberation through non-harm and austerity. What it is. It's a rigorous liberation system built on ethics as metaphysics in action. Core goal. Liberation of the soul through purity and non-attachment. How it's practiced. Non-violence, truthfulness, austerity, carefulness, vows, and contemplative discipline. Who this will suit. Those drawn to extreme ethical integrity and restraint. Buddhism, early path, Theravada stream. When it emerges, 5th century BCE. How it comes into being. It is a response to suffering and the instability of identity, liberation framed psychologically and meditatively. What it is. A disciplined path of mind training aimed at awakening. The core goal, nirvana. Freedom from craving, ignorance, and mechanisms of suffering. How it's practiced. Precepts, mindfulness, concentration, insight meditation, monastic or lay discipline. Who this suits. Those who want clarity, sobriety, psychological precision, and consistent practice. Classical Greek philosophy as spiritual discipline, Platonism and Stoicism. When it emerges, 4th and 3rd century BCE onward. How it comes into being. Philosophy as formation of the soul, not mere theory. What it is. Virtue ethics and contemplative metaphysics, Platonism, and inner freedom through Stoicism. The core goal, alignment with reason and nature, ethical mastery and inner stability. How it's practiced: reflection, journaling, and ethical practice, contemplation, and disciplines of attention and desire. Who this suits: those who want a grounded, non-dogmatic discipline that still transforms the person. Era 3, Late Antiquity Esoteric Streams, 1st through 6th centuries CE. 7. Greco-Egyptian Hermeticism. When it emerges, 1st and 3rd centuries, this is Hellenistic Egypt. How it becomes into being. Syncretic world blends Greek philosophy, Egyptian religious symbolism, astrology, mystery cult atmosphere, and mystical speculation. What it is: a psychological, mystical cosmology teaching that mind and cosmos interlock. The core goal: gnosis, awakening to divine intellect and cosmic order. How it's practiced: contemplation, ethical purification, cosmological meditation, and later influenced on alchemy and astrology. Who it suits: symbolic thinkers who want metaphysical structure and contemplative depth. Gnosticism, initiatory Christianity. When it emerges, 1st through the 4th century CE. How it comes into being. Early Christian diversity. Some groups emphasize inner revelation and cosmic discernment over institutional consolidation. What it is: a family of movements centered on liberation through hidden knowledge and awakening from spiritual amnesia. The core goal: liberation through gnosis, remembering the divine spark and restoring true identity. How it's practiced: esoteric scripture reading, symbolic myth contemplation, ethical purification, and initiatory instruction, and also mystical prayer. Who this suits: those drawn to inner revelation, symbolic theology, and discernment, who can avoid cynicism and keep the heart intact. 9. Neoplatonism. When it emerges, the 3rd through 6th century CE. How it comes into being. Philosophical synthesis reaches mystical intensity, reality understood as emanation from the One. What it is: a path of interior ascent, many into one. The core goal is union with the One through purification and contemplation. How it is practiced: ethical refinement and contemplative ascent, metaphysical discipline of attention. Who it suits: philosophical mystics who prefer contemplative metaphysics over ritual. Theurgy. When it emerges, the 3rd to the 6th century CE, the late Neoplatonic milieu. How it comes into being: a view that intellect alone is insufficient. Ritual can realign the soul with the divine orders. What it is: sacred ritual as a technology of reintegration with divine realities. The core goal: participation in divine order, purification and ascent via ritual communion. How it is practiced: invocations, hymns, sacred symbols, ritual timing, and purity disciplines. Who it suits: those drawn to reverent ritual and symbolic precision, not results chasing. Early Christian mysticism, monastic and contemplative. When it emerges is in the 3rd century CE onward. How it comes into being: desert traditions and monastic life developed as discipline, interior spirituality. What it is: prayer as transformation, purification of the heart, and union with God. The core goal is theosis, union with the divine, sanctified of the inner life. How it's practiced: contemplative prayer, fasting, vigilance of thought, scripture contemplation, and sacramental life. Who it suits: devotional temperaments who want purification, humility, and interior depth. Era 4, medieval esoteric systems, the 7th through the 15th century CE. 12, Sufism, which is Islamic mysticism. When it emerges, it's in the 8th century CE onward. Orders systemized later, especially the 10th through the 13th centuries. How it comes into being. The inward dimension of Islam intensifies. Ethics become love. Love becomes remembrance, and remembrance becomes direct knowing. What it is. Heart path of remembrance within Islamic tradition. The core goal is fana, which is ego dissolution, and bhakta, abiding in the divine presence. How practiced. The dikur, ethical refinement, devotion, teacher-guided tariqah, and disciplined remembrance. Who it suits. These moved by devotion and humility, and those who want transformation through love and moral refinement. Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, also pronounced Kabbalah. Sometimes you'll see it spelt with a C. Just depends on the school of thought. When it emerges, major flowering 12th through 13th centuries rooted in early mystical currents. How it comes into being. Mystics seek deeper Torah meanings, cosmic structure, and soul repair amid upheaval and exile. What it is. A metaphysical map of emanation and return, tree of life as a spiritual anatomy. The core goal is tikkun, which is repair, aligning with the divine flow, union with the infinite, the Ein, or the Ein Sof. How it's practiced, mystical study, later contemplation, ethical discipline, prayer with intention, and lived observance. Who it suits. Those who love symbolic systems and can sustain rigorous study and ethical responsibility. Taoism, internal cultivation, or the Naidan. When it emerges, classical Taoism, 4th through 3rd century CE, internal alchemy matures especially through the 7th through 13th century CE. How it comes into being. Observation that breath, attention, energy, and spirit intertransform. Refinement becomes the path. What it is. Somatic spiritual alchemy. Jing, He, and Shen. Core goal. Integration, clarity, spiritual refinement, sometimes framed as immortality of spirit. How it's practiced. Breath work. Energy circulation, stillness, posture, alignment, lifestyle harmonization, lineage methods. Those who it will suit, those who want subtle embodiment practice and patient cumulative change. 15. Yoga traditions, Raja, Bhakta, Jnana, and Karma. When it emerges, roots ancient systemized forms across cultures. Yoga Sutras, often dated to the 2nd BC through the 4th CE, Bhakti movements strongly form from the 6th century onward, later Hatha developments. How it comes into being. Multiple streams form, devotion, knowledge, service, meditation, discipline, each a doorway suited to different temperaments. What it is. Union through discipline method. The core goal is liberation and stabilization of consciousness. How it's practiced. Meditation, devotion, inquiry, service, ethical restraints, and breath and body disciplines in some streams. Who this will suit. People who need a complete human training, mind, heart, ethics, and embodiment. 16. Medieval and Renaissance grimoires, Solomonic, planetary, and angelic. When it emerges, text traditions circulate strongly through the 13th and 17th century. How it comes into being. Clerical magic, folk practice, astronomical timing, and angelology crystallized into manuals. What it is. ritual engagement with spiritual intelligences using names, seals, timing, purification, and constraint. The core goal is ordered contact, protection, obtaining knowledge, and structured operations, which varies by text and practitioner. How it's practiced: purification, circles, conjurations, planetary timing, talismans, prayers, constraints, and licenses to depart. Who it suits: only disciplined, sober practitioners with strong ethics and psychological stability. Otherwise, it becomes distorted. Era 5, Renaissance and Early Modern Synthesis. From the 15th to the 7th century CE. Renaissance Hermeticism and Christian Kabbalah. When it emerges, 15th to 16th century. How it comes into being: rediscovery, transmission of classical text, synthesis of Platonism, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, Christianity, and astrology. What it is: an elite intellectual spiritual synthesis. Cosmos are a symbolic ladder. Core goal: ascent of the soul through knowledge, virtue, and sacred correspondence. How it's practiced: steady contemplation, devotion, philosophy, astrology, and sometimes ritual and theurgical methods. Who it suits: scholarly mystics, symbol literature minds, and those who want tradition plus metaphysics. Alchemy, spiritual alchemy as a path. When it emerges, Hellenistic roots, Islamic refinement, and European flowering through the 14th through 17th centuries. How it comes into being: matter work becomes soul work, transformation staged and mirrored internally. What it is: a symbolic technology of transmutation. The core goal: inner integration and refinement, often mapped as nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. How it's practiced: symbol study, contemplative work, moral purification, and sometimes laboratory work historically. Who it suits: these drawn to cycles of death and rebirth, psychology, and deep symbolic transformation. Rosicrucianism. This is Christian mysticism. When it emerges in the early 17th century, the Manifesto era. How it becomes into being: a call for reformation of knowledge, spiritual and scientific, amid religious conflict and intellectual upheaval. What it is: esoteric Christianity blended with alchemy and initiatory idealism. The core goal: illumination and reformation of self/society through hidden wisdom. How it's practiced: it varies, often steady, moral refinement, symbolic contemplation, and later orders formalize. Who it suits: those called to disciplined idealism and spiritual scholarship. Era 6, Enlightenment and Fraternal Initiation. 18th century CE. Freemasonry. And what I will say about Freemasonry, generally for the most part, you have to know someone who is already in the order to get an invite for initiation, which is a very long process. But you can't just walk into a Freemasonic temple and ask to be a member. You have to know somebody that can vouch for you. Just a little side note there. When it emerges, formal organizational milestones, early 18th century, 1717, often cited for modern structure. How it comes into being: operative craft symbolism becomes moral and initiatory, and also allegory. What it is: degree-based initiation, use symbolic drama to shape character. Core goal: moral refinement, self-knowledge, fraternity, service, esoteric depth varies by body. How it's practiced: lodge ritual, degree progression, symbolic study, ethics, community, and obligation. Who it suits: those who benefit from structure, fraternity, and gradual initiation, and embodied allegory. Martinism, Christian mystical tradition. When it emerges, 18th century France into larger orders. How it comes into being. Christian mystical currents formalize an initiatory system emphasizing reintegration. What it is. Initiatory mysticism with an inward Christian metaphysics. Core goal. Reintegration with the divine. Purification and interior illumination. How it's practiced. Degree-style progression, contemplation, prayerful metaphysics, and moral discipline. This suits devotional mystics who want structured initiation without theatrics. Era 7, 19th century occult revival and systemization. This is 1800s. And it could even go back to 1840s up until the 1930s and 40s. So this is the spiritualism movement when it emerges in the mid-19th century. How it comes into being. Cultural fascination with afterlife, seances, mediumship, and reaction to materialism, grief plus curiosity. What it is. Spiritual communication and survival of consciousness focus. The core goal is to contact, get evidence, guidance, comfort, and sometimes moral instruction from spirit. How its practices. Seances, mediumship development, spiritual circles. Who it suits. Those oriented towards mediumship but must be grounded to avoid obsession and porous boundaries. Theosophy. When it emerges, the late 19th century, around the 1870s. How it comes into being. A synthesis attempt. Eastern philosophies plus Western esotericism plus evolutionary cosmology. What it is. Esoteric cosmology emphasizing spiritual evolution and hidden orders and teachers. The core goal is spiritual evolution of humanity and comprehension of hidden laws. How it is practiced. Steady. Meditation, ethical ideals, comparative esotericism, and often more doctrinal than operational. This suits those drawn to grand cosmological synthesis and comparative spiritual study. The Golden Dawn, style Western initiatory magic. So this, among the others I previously mentioned, this is what I'm really well versed in, and this is the school of thought that I teach from on this channel. When it emerges, late 19th century. But also, I wanted to note that ceremonial magic is older than the 19th century. The 19th century is the systemization revival built on older currents like theurgy, medieval grimoires, Renaissance synthesis, and early ritual technologies. How it comes into being. Earlier grimoires, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, and astrology. Rosicrucian threads and organized into grades and rituals. What it is. It's a formal ceremonial system with structured initiatory progression. The core goal is balanced psyche, trained will, purified perception, conscious perception, and spiritual forces. How it's practiced. Banishing and purification of the elemental grades, planetary work, path working, talismans, invocation, and study. Who it suits. Disciplined practitioners who can integrate psychologically and practice consistently. Era 8, 20th century explosion of modern paths. In the 1900s, Thelema. This is the one that Aleister Crowley got together. So this is one solely based on him basically bringing this in. He was a part of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, but he broke off several times from the secret orders that he was in, and at one point he created Thelema. When it emerges, it's in the early 20th century. It comes into being during the modern occult revival, ceremonial lineage, mysticism, and individual sovereignty crystallized into a distinct current. What it is. the path of true will, self as a star with a precise orbit. Core goal, discover and enact true will, align with transpersonal purpose beyond ego whims. How it's practiced, ritual magic, devotion, meditation, yoga, initiatory systems, ethical self-mastery, and symbolic principle. Who it suits, those capable of serious self-responsibility, rigor, and long-term alignment work. Anthroposophy. When it emerges, it's in the early 20th century. How it comes into being. A spiritual science approach blending esoteric Christianity, clairvoyant cosmology, and practical cultural application. What it is structured worldview, a meditative exercise applied to education, art, healing, and agriculture. The core goal, higher cognition, ethical responsibility, integration of spirit with culture. It's practiced by steady meditative exercises, community work, and applied disciplines. Who it's suited for, those who want a comprehensive worldview with practical outlets. Jungian depth psychology as inner alchemy. This emerged in the 20th century. How it comes into being. Psychology meets myth, symbol, and unconscious as a spiritual threshold. What it is, individuation as initiation, integrating shadow and archetypes. The core goal is wholeness, integration, and conscious relationship to the unconscious. It's practiced through dream work, shadow work, active imagination, symbolic study, and therapy-style discipline. It suits those needing psychological integration as a foundation before intense esoteric work. Modern pagan revival, the Reconstructionist path. It emerges in the 20th century onward, and it varies by tradition. How it comes into being. Reclaiming pre-Christian European religions through scholarship and reconstruction. What it is. Devotional polytheism or animism with cultural, historical emphasis. The core goal, relationship with deities, spirits, and cultural religiosity, ethical and communal practice. How it's practiced, offerings, festivals, rites, study of sources, community, and practice. This suits those drawn to devotion and cultural reconstruction with seriousness. Then there's Wicca. When it emerges is in the 20th century. How it comes into being. A modern ritual religion drawing from folk magic, ceremonial forms, seasonal rites, and popularity theology. What it is, witchcraft as priesthood of nature cycles in its religious form. The core goal is alignment with seasonal powers, personal empowerment, and devotion to deity forms, and this varies by tradition. How it's practiced, the sabbats, estabats, the circle casting, spell work, deity reverence, and ethical codes vary by lineages. Who it suits, those who want ritual structure, nature-based spirituality, and community practice. 30. Folk magic, traditional witchcraft. This is distinct from Wicca. When it emerges, it has ancient roots, continuous lineages in various forms in modern revivals. How it comes into being. Community-level spiritual practice for protection, healing, blessings, cursing, divination, often outside of elite institutions. What it is. Practical magic embedded in culture and spirit relations. The core goal is practical outcomes and relationships with spirits, land, ancestors. How it's practiced. Charms, prayers, spirits, herbs, divination, and protective rites, often highly localized. Who it suits. Those who want a grounded practice, ancestral orientation, and practical ritual skill. Era 9, late 20th century to now, postmodern and hybrid paths. In the 1970s to present, chaos magic. when it emerges, the 1970s to the 80s. How it comes into being, reaction against rigid occult dogma, a pragmatic experimental approach to forms. What it is, belief is a tool, methods are modular, results oriented. The core goal is effective change in consciousness and circumstances using adaptable techniques. How it's practiced, sigils, servitors, trance/gnosis states, paradigm shifting, and experimentation. Who it suits, experimenters with strong self-awareness who can avoid fragmentation and compulsive novelty. I, however, recommend not starting out with chaos magic right from the get-go. This needs to be done when more foundational understanding is in place. Okay, so I wouldn't start out with chaos magic. New thought and manifestation currents. When it emerges, late 19th century roots, major popularization in the modern era. How it comes into being, mind power metaphysics blends spirituality with success culture. What it is, it's consciousness as causative force in experience. The core goal is prosperity, health, desired outcomes, and sometimes framed as spiritual evolution. How it is practiced, affirmations, visualizations, mental discipline, and emotional management. Who it suits, useful as a tool set, incomplete as a full initiatory path, unless paired with ethics and depth. So this is kind of more of a new age type practice. If you're wanting to get into esotericism, this right here, I mean, you're going to hear about it in your studies, but I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into this if you are seeking an esoteric path. I mean, we've all been there. I was there at one point, and it just wasn't doing it for me. So that's why I got really deep into esotericism. So I highly recommend that. Contemporary eclectic mystery schools, modern integrative paths. When it emerges, the late 20th century onward. How it comes into being. Traditional material becomes accessible, modern teachers synthesized into curricula, and what it is, structured programs blending multiple currents of Hermetic, Kabbalah, astrology, ritual, and psychology. The core goal is integrated development, mind, ethics, energy, symbol literacy, and practice. How it's practiced, coursework, guided practice, community, and progressive training arcs. This suits those who need structure but don't have access to historical lineages. Discernment is essential. Eastern paths, placed chronologically but grouped here for clarity. So now I'm going to get into the Eastern. 34 is Advaita Vedanta. I'm butchering these names and I apologize, you guys. I'm super not well versed in the Eastern pronunciations. But basically what it is non-dual realization. So when it emerges is Upanishadic roots, systemized strongly by 8th century CE. How it comes into being. Liberation framed as identity correction, self and absolute are one. The core goal is realization of non-duality. Practices include self-inquiry, meditation, discernment, and study. Who it suits, those who can sustain subtle inquiry and tolerate ego disillusion without bypass. Mahayana Buddhism. When it emerges, the 1st century BCE onward, this is a broad emergence. There's many different schools to this. So how it came into being. Compassion and bodhisattva ideal intensify. Emptiness teaches expand. The core goal is awakening for the benefit of all beings. Practices include compassion, meditation, vows, and philosophical contemplation. This suits people who want heart plus insight together. Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism. When it emerges, 6th and 11th century CE in India, later elaborations in Tibet and beyond. Core goal, rapid awakening through transformation. practice is mantra, deity yoga, empowerment, ritual, and subtle body work. This suits those who suited to a lineage discipline and a symbolic precision. Zen, or Chan Zen. When it emerges in the 6th century in China, Japan from the 12th century onward. The core goal is direct awakening. The practice is zazen, koans, and monastic simplicity. This suits those who can face silence and drop conceptual addiction. How to choose a path without fragmenting yourself. You have now seen a wide landscape, ancient temple traditions, liberation philosophies, mystical Christianity, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, ritual magic, devotional Islam, yoga, Buddhism, alchemy, witchcraft, modern synthesis, and postmodern experimentation. The question now is not, what is most interesting? The question should be, what structure will refine me? And this requires honesty. When people first encounter spiritual paths, they often choose based on aesthetic appeal, cultural fascination, personality projection, a single powerful experience, or rebellion against a previous belief system. None of these are reliable foundations. A path is not an identity costume. It is a discipline. You are not choosing something that reflects who you think you are. You are choosing something that will shape becoming who you are and who you want to become. The second mistake, endless sampling. Modern access creates a psychological trap. You can practice Zen for a week, watch videos on Kabbalah, do a tarot spread, read about the Lima, try a manifestation ritual, study Taoist breathing, learn sigil method, all in the same month. This feels like exploration, but neurologically and psychologically, it creates fragmentation. Each path carries a cosmology, an ethical structure, a metaphysical assumption, a method of stabilizing attention. Constant switching prevents any of these systems from integrating into your nervous system or identity, and depth requires repetition. A framework for discernment. Instead of asking which path is coolest, ask these questions. What is my temperament? Be honest. Are you devotional, philosophical, ritual-oriented, contemplative, embodied and somatic, analytical, community-oriented, solitary? A devotional temperament may struggle in austere, non-dual inquiry. A pure analytical mind may resist devotional surrender. A ritual-oriented personality may feel ungrounded in purely contemplative systems, so your temperament matters. What level of structure do I need? Some people thrive with teachers, lineages, clear rules, ethical codes, and community accountability. Others function better in solitary contemplative systems. If you know you struggle with discipline, choose a path that includes structure. Freedom without structure often collapses into inconsistency. What is my psychological baseline? Be responsible here. If you struggle with anxiety, disassociation, trauma, emotional instability, you should prioritize stabilizing practices, ethical grounding, nervous system regulation, psychological integration. Before engaging in intense ritual or visionary practices, not every path is appropriate at every stage. Some systems intensify experience, others destabilize your identity. Know where you are. What is the core aim that resonates? Different paths aim at different outcomes. Liberation from suffering, union with God, self-mastery, energetic refinement, moral purification, cosmic understanding, and practical magical results. If you do not know what you are aiming for, you will wander. Clarity of aim reduces fragmentation. The 6-month rule. If a path genuinely resonates, commit to it seriously for 6 months, not casually and not half-heartedly. 6 months of study, practice, ethical attention, observation of your own mind, integration. At the end of 6 months, ask, am I more stable? Am I more disciplined? Am I more honest? Am I more integrated? If the answer is yes, then continue. If the answer is no, examine whether the issue is the path or your inconsistency. Only after sincere effort should you consider redirecting. When change is appropriate. Changing direction is not failure. It becomes appropriate when your understanding deepens beyond the framework. You outgrow the structure. The metaphysics no longer align, and your development requires a new emphasis. But this should feel like maturation, not impulse. A tree grows upward before it branches outward. A warning about dilution. In modern culture, spirituality is often separated from discipline, ethics, steady, accountability, and reduced to manifestation techniques, identity labels, vague energy language, aesthetic ritual, instant enlightenment narratives. This is dilution. A genuine path will require moral refinement, confrontation of ego, repetition, boredom, self-observation, responsibility. If a system promises transformation without discipline, it is incomplete. Integration over excitement. The goal is not mystical excitement, it's integration. Integration means that your behavior changes, your reactions stabilize, your speech becomes measured, your ethics sharpen, and your presence deepens. If a practice increases drama but not integrity, something is misaligned along the way. Final reflection. Every authentic path exists because human beings across centuries ask themselves, how do I refine myself? How do I see clearly? How do I live in alignment with reality? You are not choosing entertainment. You are choosing formation. Take your time. Choose carefully. Commit sincerely, and allow the path to do its work. Okay, you guys, thank you for that. I'm sorry that was a little choppy. I've done a lot of speaking in the past few days, so my tongue and my brain was not letting me get out in the way that I wanted to. But I hope that this really helps you guys kind of figure out, okay, here's a list of the paths. Let's see what I'm resonated to. And this is going to be based on your culture, the religious and spiritual practices that you were raised in. All of these things are going to have a factor. Your tendencies, your mental, emotional tendencies, all of these things will definitely have an impact on it. Don't get so worried about which one to choose. Just start with something that resonates with your background, and then do that for 6 months. Really put yourself into it. And if it doesn't work, then you can move on to something else. I would highly suggest not over seeking and over consuming a lot of spiritual material whilst you have picked a path and you were on it, because the biggest thing is integration. I have been talking about this for months on end on my channel. So it's just really important to pick something that resonates with you deeply, according to your knowledge, what you've learned, your culture, all of that. It'll make the transition a little bit smoother. You can always change later. Don't get hung up on, I have to make sure that I pick the right path because I have to be, I'm going to be with this for a long time. You've got to kind of let that go. Okay. So I hope this answered the subscriber's question. I hope this helps more of you guys choose a path and kind of have an idea of all the mainstream things that are coming down the line. If you have any questions regarding any of these, please don't hesitate to ask. And I have two new series that are going to be coming up after this one. I have an altar series that's going to be 4-part, and I also have a coherent series that I'm working on, getting those finished and recorded for you guys. So, all right, I will see you guys next time. Later.